Welcome to the Jerome Early Career Printmakers Residency Info Session. My name is Josh Bindwald. I'm the Director of Artist Programs here at High Point, and I coordinate this residency. Therefore, I will be the person to reach out to if you have any questions in preparing your application. Let's get started. First, we'll go through an overview of the program. So the Jerome Residency is for early career Minnesota artists with experience in one or more of the traditional printmaking techniques. The timeline for this program is as follows. The applications are due Monday, June 24th before midnight, so 11:59 p.m. The residency will begin September 2nd, 2024, September 2nd as opposed to September 1st because September 1st this year is Labor Day. The culminating exhibition of the residency will open in June of 2025, but the residency itself will conclude on August 31st of 2025. Because we've increased our benefits for the first time this year, as you will see in the next portion, which is the benefits of the program. So the reason that the exhibition occurs well before the end of the residency itself is because we have increased the portion of access to the Artist Cooperative Studio for the residents. Whereas the Jerome Residency previously provided 9 months of access to the Print Shop Cooperative at High Point, it now provides 12. However, the exhibition remains in our calendar to take place between June and July each year. So, residents, as I said, will receive 12 months of access to the High Point Cooperative Print Shop. The print shop is fully equipped for each of the foundational or traditional print techniques, lithography, both plate and stone, and photolithography, all forms of intaglio, including polymer gravure, screen printing, relief, monoprinting, and so on. Really, the only things that the shop doesn't specifically support our letterpress because we don't have a type library or letterpress specific equipment, and we don't have the facilities for certain post-digital processes like laser cutters or large format digital printers, things like that. But essentially, every conceivable foundational traditional form of print is supported in the shop, and then some. There are ways to integrate some of those post-digital processes as well. The $3,500 stipend is, of course, a massive benefit especially to early career artists. That money can go a long way in supporting one's practice. This, I'm glad to say, has increased this year from, I believe it was $1,000 previously. It's now $3,500. And we do not require any sort of a program budget or our residents to track their purchases, what they've done with this money, or anything like that. It's money just to support their practice however that money is needed. It could go toward materials, it could go toward exhibition costs, it could go toward childcare. Frankly, whatever is needed to support that artist's practice. There are in-progress critiques that take place at 4 different points throughout the residency year. They're spaced out approximately 1.5 to 2.5 months apart, the first taking place usually between Halloween and Thanksgiving, and then the final critique taking place either right before the exhibition is installed or while the exhibition is on view. I like to work with the artists to make the determination of what their preference is as far as the final exhibition. Do they want last minute feedback, or would they rather just have the work that they've completed during the residency year, get some feedback on that in their exhibition? Also, I try to coordinate the studio visitors, the people that we invite in to do these critiques, so that they coincide with the artist interests and lived experience. As best I can anyway, I try to do that. You will receive technical support from the residency coordinator as needed, as requested. The Here in this image, I am helping one of our current residents learn lithography. Gennady Hartman wanted to create stone lithographs, so we worked on that together, and I'm very glad to say it turned out extremely well. So that support is available upon request, of course. I, as the fellowship coordinator, can be available in a role that's almost like a pseudo mentor if that is something that a particular resident would like. Certainly not a requirement, but there is availability for additional support from me as the residency coordinator. Another benefit is that we provide $500 credit toward adult classes at High Point and or individual instruction. The rate for individual instruction is $45 an hour, so you can actually learn quite a bit in what would equate to like 10 and a half hours of instruction. So that's also something available to residents, or if they prefer, if there's a particular class or classes that we offer, they are able to sign up for those and use their $500 credit toward those. Of course, there is the culminating exhibition in High Point's galleries that takes place in June. This is another one of the immense benefits of this program. Our gallery space is sizable. It's really visible. It's right on Lake Street with floor-to-ceiling windows in one of the rooms. And it's a space that our residents can really just kind of go to town with. In this image, you can see that there is a tendency to certainly kind of move away from straightforward traditional prints on paper displayed in frames. That is, of course, certainly welcome, but a lot of our residents will kind of run with alternative installation techniques and really use this as a time to experiment, and that's something we welcome and support. Again, the residency is pretty malleable for the residents themselves to kind of determine what it needs to be for them. And the exhibition is documented. We bring in a professional photographer to shoot the exhibition, and that documentation is really important, really for any artist, but you can make the argument that for an early career artist, it's extremely important because this is not only an incredible opportunity to have an exhibition in our gallery, but to have professional documentation of it that you can use for additional opportunities is really valuable. There's many more benefits as well. Pictured here is a visit from a few years ago that the residents and myself took the Walker Art Center for a guided tour of a Julie Meritou exhibition. I try to schedule at least several of these each residency year, particularly when the exhibitions on view at local institutions seem like they would be of great interest for whatever reason to the residents. There's all kinds of opportunities that are too numerous to mention here, but basically what they boil down to is opportunities for getting outside of High Point to view artwork, to have studio visits with additional people, to have dinner with people who are at High Point for other reasons, et cetera, et cetera. We really try to caretake and make the most of this opportunity as possible for our resident artists. So those are the benefits. Now let's move on to the expectations of the residency. Each resident must attend a studio/residency orientation. Residents, because they use the studio space, much like our artist cooperative members, they need to adhere to the studio etiquette and health and safety guidelines, as well as everything else outlined in our cooperative member contract. They're required to attend all 4 of the scheduled critiques. These critiques are scheduled with the knowledge and input of the residents themselves. So therefore, attendance shouldn't be a difficult thing. They're typically on weekday evenings. on a day that works well for all three of the residents as well as the visitor. But this really doesn't ever prove to be a problem. Residents also need to agree to be photographed at work in the print shop. This is really nothing more than, if you're in the space, we like to have some documentation of that. We like to have images from each residency year of our residents at work in the space. This is helpful for grant reporting. It's also helpful for promoting subsequent years of the residency itself. This opportunity is not limited to printmakers in the Twin Cities metro area. The vast majority of people that apply to this program are located within the Twin Cities area, and that makes sense because proximity to the studio is for an early career artist, printmaker, pretty important. However, I want to be abundantly clear that it's not a requirement. There is no geographic requirement other than living in the state of Minnesota. So if you are outstate and you fit the criteria for this program and you're interested, and you're able to make it work coming in to use the studios on weekends or something like that, please, by all means, apply to this. Don't let your proximity deter you. You must have lived continuously in Minnesota since September 2nd, 2023 or before. The deadline for application, again, is September 2nd, 2024. So you have to have maintained Minnesota residency for at least 1 year prior to that application deadline. Likewise, you must live in Minnesota for the duration of the residency program, which would be September 2024 through August of 2025. You may not be a full-time degree-seeking student, and you must demonstrate proficiency in at least one foundational printmaking technique. And this is going to be demonstrated in your work sample. Early career is, of course, impossible to empirically define. Definitions, frankly, can vary from person to person. However, for the context of this program, we define it here as an artist with a record of creating and exhibiting original work who has not received consistent development and production opportunities and significant recognition, awards, and acclaim, regardless of age or recognition in other fields. And High Point, as well as the Jerome Foundation and our independent panelists, reserve the right to determine applicant status as early career. If there is any confusion or you're just not entirely sure on whether or not you would make a good candidate for early career residency, reach out to me directly. I'm sure I can help you navigate to an answer to that question. Phone number is here on the screen, as well as my email address. It's also easy to find on our website. Now let's move on to the application process itself. So the first time this year, we are accepting applications through submittable.com. A link to the application can be found on High Point's website. If you go to submittable.com, you can also search for High Point or printmaking opportunities or Jerome Residency. It should not be difficult to find. Submittable does not require its users to create profiles like some other application portals do, which is a huge advantage. You'll just have to have your materials ready and upload them during your application. Submittable also saves your application progress, which is a huge benefit. And really the only thing that you'll have to do is once your application is ready to go and you click submit, I think they send, what do they call it, a verification email that you simply need to click on to say, yes, this is me, I am applying, and then you're good to go. Submittable tech support is also second to none for applicants as well as for us as the program managers. For the application itself, you're going to have an image sample, of course, and this is going to be 15 images, and 10 of those 15, at least 10, have to include printmaking in some form. Now, those 10 images don't need to be only printmaking. We're not We're not absolutist in such a way. We understand that artistic practices are, probably more interdisciplinary now than they have been at any point in the past. So let's say you have a work on canvas that is primarily acrylic, but you have done some screen printing onto it, or you've collaged some, let's say, intaglio onto that canvas or something. Those do qualify. Basically, if at any point in creating the work there is an identifiable printmaking technique in the final product, that would qualify. For some people, this isn't even a gray area because all 15 of your images are going to be printmaking based. But I just want to be clear that if you've got at least printmaking as a part of your practice and you're able to demonstrate in 10 images the use of printmaking, that does qualify. You're going to submit a statement of artistic practice. Include your name on the statement. The statement should be 2 pages maximum written. You can also opt to record a video of the statement as opposed to submitting something written. If you do record a video, please limit it to 3 minutes. Now, I have more tips for writing your statement than are listed even here, and those can be found. There's a page on our website that is Jerome Residency FAQ, and a lot of those frequently asked questions relate directly to preparing one's application. But just to go over it very basically here, your statement should cover the what, why, and how you make work. The how should probably have a little less import in crafting the statement, specifically when you get to granular details about technique. Printmakers, as process-oriented people, we have a tendency to kind of nerd out on the technical aspects of what we're making. However, I just want to caution you that the people reading your application aren't necessarily printmakers themselves. At least one of them is likely to have a decent amount of print knowledge or experience, but it's safe to say that both of them are not super well versed in print. Therefore, don't get too involved with very, very inner printmaking talk. If process is extremely important in a way that relates directly to the content, the what and why you make work, then I think that's a good reason to potentially spend more time on the how, but generally a little less time on the how and more of the content and the concepts informing your work. Those content and concepts can be biographical if identity is an important component of your work. If your biographical information ties into in some way to the work that you make and why, I would certainly include that. There's many reasons people might want to include a good deal of biographical information, lived experience, etc., etc. Basically, to summarize, what your statement is doing is it's supplementing your image sample. Your image sample is providing the visual for the panelists. They're seeing the work. They're being engaged by it. What your statement can do is provide them additional context. You can think of it as a way to sell your work. Whereas your work itself is speaking to the panelists visually, your statement is speaking to it through language, through either your written or your recorded statement, and provides additional context and frankly can kind of be your hype man, as it were, for the work itself. As I said, there are more tips on our website under that Jerome Residency FAQ, but I'm also happy to try to help you, give you some additional ways to craft your statement. Just reach out to me directly. For the selection process, I keep referring to the panelists. So there will be a panel of 2 arts professionals, and they are going to review the images and written or recorded materials first. They will do these digitally. Once the application deadline is passed, I will compile everything, send it off to the panelists, and they'll have a period of several weeks to look everything over, each applicant individually, and they're going to use a rubric to score each application. I want to be very clear here that the rubric is not the deciding factor in who gets this residency. Rather, it's simply a tool that the panelists use to determine how well each applicant has satisfied the criteria that we set forth in evaluating these. And ultimately what it's going to do is, when the panelists come together, the rubric will be one of the things that they use to start their conversation with each other about their selection. And the rubric, we're trying to be extremely transparent with this. So these are exactly the rubric criteria. These are also listed on our website, but I'll run through them for you here. So these, 6 criteria will be scored on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst and 5 being the absolute best. The submitted artwork is effective visually and otherwise. The submitted artwork demonstrates understanding and command of the media and techniques used, and/or the submitted artwork successfully employs the media and techniques used. The submitted artwork demonstrates an authentic, well-considered conceptual foundation. The statement of artistic practice demonstrates an understanding of the content found in the artwork. The application demonstrates a capacity for growth, visually, conceptually, and/or professionally. And the applicant demonstrates motivation and dedication to capitalize on the opportunity the Jerome Residency provides. These are purposefully specific, but also, I don't want to say vague, but they allow for the panelists themselves to kind of bend things to this, to basically end up advocating for applicants. We like to give agency to the panelists as much as possible. So while these criteria are set forth, they are also allowing a decent amount of ability for the panelists to sort of wedge applicants into these things as being more or less effective. Particularly if you look at something like the submitted artwork demonstrates understanding, command of the media, and/or successfully employs the media and techniques. That came about from, looking at that one way, you would think demonstrates understanding, command. Does that mean that this is just technically sound, clean margins, hypercritical, technically and perfect in a certain way? I mean, that's one way to make work, and that is, that work can be extremely successful, but there's also ways to employ techniques which are, maybe not so technically sound, but however are still very effective. So that is the reason that these criteria are a tiny bit malleable to allow each artist's image sample and each artist's application to be viewed in such a way that their strengths can be seen, if that makes sense. So following the scoring separately, the individual review by our panelists, they will come together for a final in-person image review here at High Point. As I said, they will reference the rubric scores and the notes that they created during that initial review, and we will go through each applicant one by one. I'll be projecting the images and facilitating a conversation. Of course, I remain an impartial observer, really just there to facilitate and record their conversation. And ultimately what happens is, through several rounds of reviewing the images and talking with each other, the panelists will decide on the 3 artists that they would like to award the residency to. And then following that decision, the rubric scores and the notes that that each panelist has created during that review process will be available to the applicants upon their request. Applications are firstly going to be evaluated on the image sample, and then secondary consideration is going to be given to applicants' interest, demonstrated potential, and the quality and clarity of their plan for the residency. Panel training. Before our panelists begin their review, we do provide them training. We provide them with, of course, the rubric and criteria. We also try to we take measures so that they are aware of and try to eliminate any potential inherent bias that they might have. It could be something as simple as the not my cup of tea analogy. And a panelist, perhaps, just to use an example, maybe they're not usually into figurative work. They like abstraction more. Well, we want to make sure that they nonetheless are able to fairly evaluate the artists who are making figurative work, as well as they're evaluating the artists who are making abstraction. Likewise, background, lived experience, any sort of other factors, we want them to be mindful and make sure that they are not treating any application or applicant differently than another. I'm not going to go through, the somewhat lengthy panel guidelines that we provide. I will just say that they are informed by the Jerome Foundation, as well as other sort of leaders in the field, as it were, regarding bias and panel training, etc. And we're constantly updating that in order to be transparent and current. You're always having to look at these things and identify areas for improvement. So I just want to assure you that this is something that we very much do each time we're handing this off to our panelists. That concludes my portion of this presentation. So I would welcome questions from anyone in person, or if you want to reach out to me via email or phone in the next few weeks before the applications are due, I'd be glad to hopefully help you get an answer. Thank you.